Um, Ms. Mercado, I was really taken by some of your comments, and specifically, I've been doing a little bit of work, obviously, on these issues as a member of the January 6th committee, and you talk about the study from January 6th after. Was there anything that you researched or saw, or can you share things that you heard in the community from the period of November 4th, 2020, from Election Day to January 6th specifically? And to what extent radio stations, because that's what you had monitored, spread misinformation that led to supporting the big lie, which was basically the kindling for the rallies that took place across the country in December, that culminated in the rallies on January 5th, January 6th. Was there any information that you pulled up specific to that?
Thank you for the question, Representative Aguilar. As an organization, we've registered over 200,000 Floridians to vote over the last 10 years in African American and Latino communities. And we really see it as part of our mission and mandate to make sure that people are able to participate in our democracy and do a lot of education on how to vote by mail and how to use drop boxes, how to vote safely during the pandemic. And we're really distressed by the number of reports that we were receiving that people were being told disinformation about the elections, about voting by mail, when people there's, in the state of Florida, supervisors of elections have to receive that ballot by election day. And so anyone spreading news that they can put their ballot in the mail up to election day is extremely concerning to us. And we were seeing, falsehoods about how people can vote, spreading on social media and at times on radio outlets in a way that was very concerning to us. And so we had to do a lot of work to, as my colleague Amir Patel mentioned, to make sure that the integrity of our elections was protected and that people knew how to vote, where to vote, what time to vote. At times, people even used the wrong date of the election. It was, and the number of reports that we were receiving from our members across the state was really one of the reasons why we decided to do a more comprehensive study, because we didn't have as many direct quotes or the actual clips from the radio program. But there are ways that, there were many journalists that were covering the vast disinformation that we were hearing from multiple sources.
Can you talk to me a little bit about the individuals who were targeted? Were they new voters targeted specifically with voter suppression tactics as a result of these efforts?
Yeah, I think it's important to emphasize, Miami-Dade County, you have majority Latino population, majority Spanish-speaking community, many voters. English is their second language, and they prefer to receive their news in Spanish. And I think that's why it's particularly concerning to us that there was so much disinformation in Spanish. And that's also true in Central Florida, where we redo our work, where so many people came from Puerto Rico after Hurricane Maria, and are, learning about the politics of Florida, and to be at the receiving end of so much targeted disinformation was of great concern to us.
Thank you. Mr. Patel, you talked a little bit about half of Latinos in the U.S. using WhatsApp, and 2/3, according to research by Equus Labs, 2/3 of Latinos use YouTube to receive information, and these sites struggle to combat misinformation and disinformation on their platforms. What should the CEOs of these social media platforms do to continue to tackle and address Spanish misinformation and disinformation that's prevalent on their platforms?
Yeah, thank you for asking that question. There's been a lot written about this. However, I think the number one thing is dedicating more resources to identifying Spanish language disinformation. There just simply are not enough right now. But there are a lot of minor fixes that could really, so to speak, slow down the spiral of disinformation. For instance, right now, if I were to go watch a video on YouTube around the vaccine, and I found a video that propagated falsehoods and false narratives around the vaccine. Once I finish that, the algorithm is going to basically tell me, here are 10 other videos that you might also be interested in. And so that reinforcement of disinformation is incredibly, incredibly harmful, because people that are victims of disinformation, they're just like us. We look at information like, okay, well, that's a one-off. But then if you start seeing repeated messages over time, you start believing, and you're like, okay, well, maybe that's not that crazy. So I think removing content, dedicating more resources and employees to monitoring that content, improving the algorithm so people aren't exposed to disinformation as much, are three steps that any company should probably take. Aside from that, it's very platform specific, as you know. Facebook challenges versus Twitter versus Telegram, etc. But I think the number one thing that everyone's going to talk about is, how do you reduce disinformation? You basically hire more people who are proficient in Spanish. You hire more people that have a say in how the algorithms basically promote videos, and you make those changes. And I think that those are things that are contrary to basically engagement-based interactions that we all have on social media. Like, social media sees it, oh, you're consuming this type of information, here's 20 other videos kind of like that. And I think that is right now, that reinforcement of disinformation is right now one of the most dangerous things. And on Facebook, you see that you join one group, they recommend you other groups. So you might also like this group. Being able to kind of, hamper down that sort of algorithm suggestions are also equally as important.
Thank you, Mr. Patel. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Aguilar. Next will be the young lady from the 3rd District.